In this cursive lesson, I want to continue our discussion on lowercase letters and how they start and end at the bottom lines. And without further ado, let's just jump right into it. I always like starting out with a warm-up, so here we go. Ripples, hills, waves, and mountains. Again, ripples, hills, waves, and mountains. Warm-ups are good for pen control and character alignment. Let's start our letters. Here we go. We'll have letters E, L, F, H, K, and B for today. All right, the letter E is probably the easiest in our group, E for easiest, right? And for these, you want to start and end at, well, start at the bottom and end at the midline. And you want to make sure that there's an obvious loop there. I mean, it doesn't have to be super big like that. It can be if you prefer, okay? But just make sure it's not so small that it looks like an I like that, right? It's kind of hard to tell, okay? I kind of like very small, subtle loops, but again, there's nothing wrong with making them a little bit bigger. All right, an L is just a larger version of an E. This time we're going to go up to the top line, right, instead of the midline. And again, you generally want to keep your loops, discernible, but not overly large, right? You don't want it to look like that, okay? Moving on, the letter F is a little bit trickier. It looks a lot like an L, except you're going to extend beyond the bottom line, and then you're going to loop back up to where you started, and then have a little arm at the end, like that. Notice how you don't necessarily need to go all the way up to the top line. You can go halfway, and then when you make that little bulb at the bottom for the F, what you'll notice is that it is a little bit wider and it's shorter. It's not as long as the top loop of the F. Now, there are a lot of people who put very long loops at the bottom and big ones, and if you're trying to do it for a signature, that looks pretty cool. But in terms of just sort of learning the basics, I do recommend that you don't go overboard yet, right? And just sort of try to keep your letters consistent. Okay, it is a little bit harder, admittedly, on a tablet than if I were to do this on paper, but you get the general sense, right? Okay, good job. Okay, these you'll definitely want to practice. They're a little bit harder than the first two letters. All right, moving on to H. Again, it does start a little bit like an L, except you're going to stop and then come back up to the midline and then down. Loop like an L, stop at the bottom, come back up in midline. Okay, you can experiment with how wide you want your H's. Okay, one thing that I did that I don't like is this, where I sort of kind of tuck the bottom part of my H. I don't like doing that because then it starts to look a little bit more like a K. I mean, I know right now we haven't talked about K yet, but you just want to, have it go relatively straight down and not, and I'm about to exaggerate, you don't want to like tuck it in as you go down. So you don't want that. You just want to have it pretty much just go straight down and then, have a little loop, or not loop, Gosh, I can't even think of my words. You just want it to come out like that. Okay, all right, moving on. K looks like an H, except of course we're gonna tuck in towards the initial loop and then come back out. It's kind of like, it kind of reminds me of a ribbon, right? That's tied at the center. Okay, am I the only one that sees the ribbon? Probably. I also named my warm-up, so that tells you a little bit of how strange I am, okay? So there's our K. Okay, here we go. Try a couple more. These are actually some of the prettier letters, I think. All right, what I don't want you guys to do is loop your Ks or make them really high like that. Why? Because that actually looks a lot like an uppercase R, which we'll get to in a couple of lessons from now. So keep it all under the midline, okay? All right, last but not least, the letter B. What I want you to do is either mentally or physically, right, put a little asterisk next to the B, because we're gonna pick that up or talk a little bit more about that even in the next session, as it has some things in common with the next group of letters that we're gonna do. But the reason I grouped it in here is because it does look a lot like the other letters that we've done so far. So because you guys are sort of already used to that pattern, I went ahead and just included the letter B in here. Now some of you guys might notice how similar it looks to the F. It's almost like you just took the letter F and shrunk it a little bit and then had the starting point at the midline instead of the bottom line, right? If you guys don't see that, you don't have to hallucinate. Don't worry about it. Just practice making that loop almost like an L, right? Coming up to the midline like that, and there's your letter B. Now, some of you guys might have picked up on what makes B so special that I put a little red star, and that is that unlike the other letters here, the letter B ends at the midline. And so these letters above the letter B, they're going to connect just like we've connected all the other ones so far, all the other letters that we've learned even from the last session. But the letter B, because it connects at the midline, it's going to connect differently. Okay, so let's try writing a couple of words, okay, using some of the letters from today's session and previous sessions. So I'm going to make a little list of words here for us to practice. Okay, let's practice the word feel. I'm going to write these in printing, of course, first. Okay, shell, how about nest, and then maybe crib. Oh, we haven't learned C yet, just kidding. Herb. Okay. Let's start with the word feel. Again, write your letters out individually first, right? And then you can sort of visualize how it's going to look when you put them together. Okay. Do it again. Okay, one more time. Okay, I'll tell you what I like and don't like about some of the things that I've done here, right? I'm going to critique my own writing. Okay, in terms of how well the letters are spaced out and the uniformity of how tall they are, okay, I think this is the best, right? Like generally, those are about the same height, right? And it's not perfect by all means, okay? And then these are pretty spaced out right here. Like the letters are just kind of funky in terms of how they're spaced out. I don't like that. But what I do like about these second and third ones are the shape of the loops, right? Like here, the loops of my E's are kind of tight and close together. It's much better here and here. And also the loops also feel a little bit more smooth, right, in these letters as opposed to these over here in my first try. So again, that's the whole purpose of doing drills, right? Is to just get a better feel for your habits and the kind of stuff that you should watch out for. All right, so shell, if we wrote them out individually, okay, oh, I kind of wrote those close together because I'm just so eager to get it all into one word. Okay, there's shell. Okay, notice how we, or I should say, okay, again, I'm always trying to be conscious of spacing between my letters, always trying to be conscious of how tall my letters are, that they're uniform. And again, if I try to take inventory of like the slant of my letters, they're generally about the same. Maybe the S is the one that's slanted the most, but again, right, I'm not all over the place as far as my slant goes. They're not really crooked. So that's the kind of stuff you want to look at. All right, finally, nest. Now, if you've gotten to the point where you're like, okay, I don't need to write them individually to put, before I put them together, that's okay. And if you want to, you certainly can. Okay, nest. Okay, one more time. All right, how are you guys doing? Okay, don't let me rush you. Take your time as you write these. Okay. And again, it's all about quality. Okay. Try to make sure that every letter has that start and stop at the midline or at the top. Okay. Mind where you dot your T's every time. Okay. And every time you'll just get better and better. Last but not least, let's do the word herb. Okay. If you want to do them separately, it's good practice. Okay. Then you'll put them together when you're ready. Okay, so I did that thing again where the second arm is not as tall. Or is just as tall, I should say. There we go, that's better. Okay, one more time. Okay. All right. How are you guys doing? Do you feel confident about these letters that we learned today? Did you need to look back at the last lesson to remember some of these other letters from last time, like S and R? Okay, that's okay if you need to. If you remembered them, great, good for you. Good job. I'll see you next time, guys.